evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We are just hours from the 2018 midterm elections, as you well know, and the noise levels are becoming almost unbearable. Suddenly everybody's shouting and posturing and trying to scare and bully you into voting for this or that candidate. It's all very loud. But pause for a second and consider what you are not hearing. What is missing from this cacophony? For starters, there is hardly a word about Russia. Remember that dastardly Vladimir Putin and the collusion plot that hacked our democracy? Whatever happened to that? And while we're at it, how about Brett Kavanaugh? Does that name ring a bell? What about his high school yearbook and his purported teenage drinking problem and all those gang rapes he supposedly committed? What about those? Those were the biggest stories in the world not so long ago, 24/7 on the other cable channels. Those stories are going to define this election. They were going to define this entire historical era. Everybody on television told us that. And now they are just fading memories. It turns out they were sideshows. The midterm elections were never going to be fought over Vladimir Putin or Brett Kavanaugh or just about anything else we spend most of our time talking about. This election, like all elections, was always going to turn on issues that actually affect the life of the country. This year, there are three big issues: immigration, the economy, and nationalism. The first is the most obvious. Immigration determines who lives next door to you. It determines who works in your office, who chooses your leaders. There is nothing more fundamental in any country than the question of citizenship. Whatever Donald Trump doesn't know, he definitely knows this. He's been talking about immigration for 3 years now. For all of that time, official Washington has been trying to make him stop.
The way Donald Trump has been conducting this campaign, attacking brown people, making up stories about possibly George Soros funding caravans that are still, 800 miles away to try to scare white voters.
In other words, shut up, racist. But Trump will not shut up. So they have changed tactics. The new line is, immigration doesn't really matter. The threat is hyped. Only dumb people and bigots care about borders. By the way, parties of both sides seem to believe this. Paul Ryan's office let it be known to Politico this morning that the Speaker of the House begged the president last night to stop yammering about this caravan from Central America and start talking about something important like Paul Ryan's tax bill. That's preemptive blame shifting, obviously. If Republicans lose tomorrow, Paul Ryan can point the finger at Trump rather than accept responsibility for not funding the wall that voters said they wanted. But it's also a ludicrous position to take because it's untrue. Immigration does matter. If, for example, Arizona and Texas go to the Democrats tomorrow, immigration will be the reason. Those were Republican states until the population changed. So no matter how much you lie about it, immigration is inherently important, and voters understand that. If you want people to stop worrying about the border, maybe you should secure the border. Then it won't be an issue. But people are also worried about other things that Washington doesn't notice or think is important. Here in Washington, the economy is synonymous with the stock market. Markets have boomed for 10 years. There are entire cable channels devoted to chronicling that boom. Here in Washington, the assumption is that the economy must also be booming. But the truth is that after a decade of stocks going higher, the effects, the positive ones, are still not very obvious outside select zip codes on the coasts. In Middle America, many young people understand that they will almost certainly make less than their parents made. That is a reversal of the American dream. They know they won't be able to buy cars or houses. They're not getting married. They're not having kids. Our current economic system makes it more difficult than ever for families to form. Our middle class is becoming unable to reproduce itself. Washington should be absolutely panicked about this. It is the most basic sign of failure, their failure. But nobody in either party seems to care. Their answer is just to import new families from other countries. So maybe it's not so surprising that young people say they like socialism, because what we have now is not working for them. And unless we fix it, we may get actual socialism, which will be a disaster. And that leads to the third issue of this election, which is nationalism. Now, despite what you are hearing day in and day out, nationalism is not a racial category. It has nothing to do with race or ethnicity. Nationalism is the belief that leaders ought to put the interests of their own countries above those of other countries. It's very straightforward. The president himself declared himself a nationalist the other night. Watch.
They have a word it sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
Trump's a nationalist. So in normal times, the president of the United States announcing that his main goal is protecting the United States would not qualify as news, because until about 10 minutes ago, every leader of every nation state throughout history has been a nationalist, almost by definition. Franklin Roosevelt was a nationalist. So was Abraham Lincoln. So was Mahatma Gandhi. So was Nelson Mandela. Nationalism has always been the rule. And why wouldn't it be? And yet suddenly it's an abomination.
Nationalist. Use that word. We're going to talk about that word tonight. It is a favorite of the alt-right and is loaded with nativist and racial undertones. And globalists, well, globalists have been used as a slur of sorts, sometimes even against those in the administration, often with anti-Semitic overtones, which has happened to make the president come right out and embrace nationalism openly and claim that mantle. What has happened here?
What are you trying to say as President of the United States, that you're a nationalist? Americans know what that means. It's not even a dog whistle anymore. It's a bullhorn.
Dumb people repeating the same talking points. So the message is nationalism is now profanity, the word itself. Twitter and Facebook will surely be banning the term if they haven't already. But why? What exactly is going on here? Why are they so intent on stamping out not just the concept, but the very word? It's simple. What you're watching is people protecting their own prerogatives. Globalization, which is the opposite of nationalism, has caused an enormous transfer of wealth from the American middle class to what we used to call the third world, to other countries. American factories closed, but the jobs didn't go away. They just went to other countries. Now, some Americans got very rich from this. Many others got poorer. That's what happened. Rather than admit what actually happened, though, the people who got richer are trying to make the people who got poorer shut up and stop complaining about it. A borderless world has been hugely profitable for them. That's why they support it. Nationalism is their kryptonite, so they must stop it. So they scream racism and hope that nationalism will go away. Will it go away? Probably not. Because the core idea is appealing to people in all countries over all time. People want leaders who are, above all, on their side. They always have wanted that. They always will want that. That's what we know. What we don't know is what's going to happen in the elections tomorrow. We won't even guess. Nothing would surprise us. But we know what the real issues are because it's obvious. And we're going to spend the next hour talking about those issues. We're going to begin tonight on immigration with Ann Coulter. She's the author of Resistance is Futile, How the Trump-Hating Left Lost Its Collective Mind. Ann Coulter joins us tonight. Ann, thanks a lot for coming on.
Sure.
So you saw this piece in Politico today, not that you're cruising Politico, I'm sure, but it kind of stuck out. And in it, a background source informed Politico that Paul Ryan has been trying to stop Trump from talking about immigration because it's irrelevant, it's a peripheral issue. What he really ought to be talking about is Paul Ryan's great success with the tax bill that became law. If this isn't preemptive butt covering, I'm not sure what is.
Beyond that, it's just so completely wrong. I'm so happy Trump has taken over my party. No, that's the old loser Democratic, or rather Republican Party, running on tax cuts. I mean, half the country doesn't even pay taxes. You know that running on the economy is a loser because, for one thing, all of the left-wing commentators are saying Trump should be talking about the economy. Please talk about the economy. Don't talk about immigration. Number two, the only argument from their side that you just played, I guess from Joe Scarborough, was to accuse people who are opposed to dumping millions of poor people on the country, driving down the wages of the working class and Joe Scarborough's maid, is to claim racism. You know, the left is so lucky that the poor countries to the south of us are Latin American countries, and we're not taking in, like, Poland's poor, or you know, Eastern Europe's poor, maybe gypsies. I don't know if he would consider gypsies darker, browner than us. It has nothing to do with race until they make it so.
So you're saying that if we were taking in, wait, just to be clear about what you're saying. So you're saying if we were taking in Eastern Europeans, then the left wouldn't get to claim racism. They'd have to think of some other reason.
Yes, no, our objection is dumping lots of poor people on the country is hurting the poor people already here and the working class already here, the low-skilled workers already here. I'd like to know how many of these, of Joe Scarborough's beloved brown people, live in the houses near him as opposed to come to clean his toilet and pool. The racism argument is, okay, I don't have an argument.
But are you struck by how much of, so there's a real economic argument, I think, to be had, which I would welcome having any time with anybody anywhere, over the effects of immigration and globalization on the country, and I think we should have that debate. But they short-circuit that debate by attacking the motives and character of the people on the other side. But does it strike you that they're doing it in order to protect their own pretty good deal, that they're getting their prerogatives?
Oh, absolutely. Mass low-wage immigration is terrific for rich people. Like I say, you get, your house cleaned so cheap. You get to strut around like you're Martin Luther King. If you work on Wall Street, you get to put together all these global deals. Globalism is great for the rich, people who live on the coast, people who need who have a lot of servants. Right. Pool boy, nanny, somebody to pick up the kids. It's terrific for them. But again, for the poor people already here, and not just poor people, I mean, it goes up the scale. So the working class gets pushed aside as well. And it shows Trump's magnificent political instincts, I think, other than actually fulfilling his promises on building a wall and deporting illegal aliens. He's doing the best he can on these midterms. I love that his instincts are no, I have to keep talking about immigration.
That's right.
Little tip for the president, it would be so much better when you're running for re-election if you actually did the stuff that you've been promising to do for 3 years.
And if your own party agreed with you. Ann Coulter, thank you for that analysis. Great to see you today.
Thank you.
Lisa Booth is at the Independent Women's Voice. She's a senior fellow there, and she's been on this show many times in the past few weeks trying to help us come up to date on these elections. She joins us one last time for last-minute developments. What is happening in the final hours?
Well, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it. Well, Tucker, as you know, we've been following the Florida gubernatorial race, and Andrew Gillum is facing, he's at least surrounded by an FBI corruption investigation into the city of Tallahassee, where he is mayor, also facing a state probe regarding failure to disclose travel and gifts. Well, it turns out his intern is also having trouble with the law. Shelby Shoup, of course, made herself famous last week for this. Take a look.
You are supporting Nazis.
This is
do you understand that?
Communism?
Yeah, I am.
Way more people
Don't pour your coffee on me.
You, I will.
Than the Nazis?
What do you understand that fascism is here?
What is wrong
Y'all understand
with you?
that Nazis are here? I hope y'all realize that you are normalizing and enabling Nazis.
Right.
And you can film me. I don't give a do you really care?
Yeah.
Do you?
I
have a jacket.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a jacket.
So you're saying that she was an intern for Gillum. Has he said anything about that?
I'm not sure about that, but she has now been arrested and charged for battery with this incident with the college Republicans. She was also wearing a communism pin, and she is a member of FSU's Students for Justice in Palestine. It's just some fun facts about Shelby. So she seems like a real peach. Well, and Tucker, we've also been following the Arizona Senate race. Now, Kyrsten Sinema, of course, has come under fire for previous statements that she's made, her anti-war statements and activities, and also that 2003 comment she made where she said she doesn't care if Americans join the Taliban. Well, she was asked point blank yesterday by NBC if she regrets those comments. Listen to what she had to say.
Do you regret that statement, though, at all?
Well, it was an offhand comment during an interview about a war that I believed was misguided and still believe is misguided. What Martha has chosen to do is run a very negative campaign based on false attacks and smears and lies. And that's her choice. But I think Arizonans are choosing the person that they believe shares their values and they believe will stand up for them.
She was asked not once but twice and refused to condemn or to say that she regretted those comments that she made. So Arizona voters should certainly keep that in mind. And also looking at the Georgia gubernatorial race. So there's been kind of this interesting video and photos being sent around and making their way around the internet of these Black Panthers in support of Stacey Abrams marching around the city of Atlanta. But look at what they are holding. They are holding, quote unquote, assault weapons and also Stacey Abrams for governor signs. But only one of those things Stacey Abrams wants to confiscate from them and also ban. And that is, of course, the quote unquote assault weapons. She, as a member of the state house, actually co-sponsored legislation to both ban assault weapons and also to confiscate them. Yet she has been on TV making the national rounds, sort of refusing to admit the fact that she did such a thing.
Unbelievable.
Right.
Lisa Booth, thank you for
Thank
that
you, Tucker.
and for all of your updates over the past few weeks.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Tucker.
Underdog Democrats like Beto O'Rourke are very popular in the press. They get a ton of coverage. There are some impressive Republican challengers, though, and they're not getting much attention at all. We're going to change that for one night only. Michigan Senate candidate John James. He's on the ballot tomorrow. He joins us next. John James is a Republican in Michigan. He's challenging Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow in the state. He's 37 years old. He flew helicopters during the Iraq War. He's been an underdog for the entire race, but polls now show him within striking distance of the incumbent senator. You think all of that might make a compelling news story, but the press have largely ignored James while turning Beto O'Rourke into a national celebrity. He's our Bobby Kennedy. Why is that? That's the question. We don't often have candidates on, but we're doing so tonight. John James joins us. Mr. James, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
The reason that we wanted to talk to you is this is one of the few questions that we think we can answer. I want to play for our viewers a recording that you made. This is a reporter who called you, you didn't answer, hung up, or thought she hung up, but didn't. And here's what she said, and you captured on tape.
My number is 989. Extension 109. Thank you.
Man, if he beats her, Jesus. Whew, that would suck. I don't think it's going to happen, though. It's possessed. He's hard to get a hold of. I hope he doesn't win for that reason, too. So, Seth, do you have anything resembling a page one article? Can you hear me? Do you have anything, top story? Did ya?
So that's Brenda Battle. She's a reporter from a local newspaper, and guess she doesn't like you. Is that your read on that?
I would say so. I would say so. I think this is just kind of the indication that you're getting, the uphill battle that many of us are facing, because a lot of the bias that we're seeing out there is just not fair for those who share different opinions than some in the progressive liberal media.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of on display there. What do you think your shot is tomorrow?
Well, we've closed the gap by the grace of God in our grassroots army. The excitement here is amazing. We're actually in the next room. We have a rally going on with a couple hundred people back there who are fired up about getting out the vote here in Michigan. But I'll tell you, we have the energy because people are sick and tired of being condescended to and the ineffectiveness and hyper-partisanship of Debbie Stabenow. People want a combat veteran who understands what it takes to take care of our veterans and keep this country safe. People want a business leader who understands how to create jobs in the real world. Somebody who understands how to grow our economy in the state of Michigan. And the liberal bias that you're seeing against this race that you just heard for yourself right here in the state of Michigan are intent on maintaining the status quo. Because I don't fit in anybody's little black box or little white box. I don't fit in their little red box or little blue box. I'm red, white, and blue, baby. And I'll tell you what, when I get to Washington, I'm going to make sure we move this state forward and we move this country forward, and we're not going to let anybody stop us. It's about keeping America safe, and it's about putting Michigan number one.
So I was wondering why haven't we been hearing? We've been hearing so much about Beto O'Rourke or whatever his fake name is, and nothing about you, and now we know why. So if you come to Washington, and we hope you do, hope you'll make a stop on this show so we can hear more. Ms. James, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Go to johnjamesforsenate.com. God bless.
God bless. Well, what are Republicans going to do if the blue wave fails to materialize and they win? What will Democrats do if they do as well as they hope and get both houses of Congress? What's going to happen if they don't? What's going to happen, period? Dana Perino is the person we go to for questions like this. She, of course, hosts the Daily Briefing with Dana Perino, is the most beloved person in the building, as you well know. So Dana, first, what would happen in the pollsters are saying unlikely, but still possible.
There's always a chance.
There is, always. Nothing should surprise us. But the scenario where Democrats don't retake the House, what happens there?
Well, I think that they're going to have a lot of soul searching to do, right? They'll say, why? How could it be? We ran on health care. Everybody said health care was the reason. You're going to have a mad scramble of probably, and I'm not kidding, Tucker, 35, maybe 40 Democrats who think that they can run for president. They're all going to be pointing their fingers at each other. We're looking at about $5 billion spent in this midterm race. The Democrats start in a deficit in the Senate. John James is an interesting candidate. I would watch that race in Michigan tomorrow night. He's only 2 points behind. He has really closed hard in that race. One thing that happens, though, is that in those Rust Belt states, lots of the Republican governors are up. Like Scott Walker, he's in a very tight re-election effort there. So a lot of stuff happening in the Rust Belt. The Democrats, however, they are favored to win back the House by some, but there is still a chance. Let's just say this. If Democrats do take back the majority in the House, and they only take it back by 10, what happens then to the Speaker's race, right?
Well,
Nancy Pelosi is unlikely to be Speaker in that scenario. There's already about 24, maybe 30 Democrats who have publicly said they would not vote for her. So there's going to be scrambling all across the map. If the Republicans are able to hold on, legislating is going to be very difficult. They have to figure out, what are we for? Are we, they've talked about tax cuts 2.0. Like, is that going to cut it? Can they really go into 2020 not addressing health care? And can they figure out a way to work with the Democrats, as they'll have to do, to work with President Trump to do something on immigration? That will be the big test of 2020.
Interesting. Who do you think, if Pelosi's not the Speaker? Because I agree with you, there's some latent hostility. She's scared. People are afraid of her, but they also resent her.
Look, and she's very good at politics, and she's willing to let people take swings, and she'll take all the slings and arrows, because she, as she said the other day, this is politics, not a tea party. So she's got a thick skin.
Right. And whatever you think of her, she's tough. She's legitimately tough.
But if she doesn't have a nice cushion of 45 seats or something like that, it's unlikely it'll be hard for her to hold on. So then I think maybe you go to a caretaker position of perhaps a James Clyburn that holds on to it for a while until they can figure out generationally and directionally which way they want to go. There will be some very interesting new Democrats that do win, right? You'll have some veterans from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. That will be interesting. You'll have some younger people. That'd be very interesting. You will have some that are very into identity politics. And you will have some from Midwestern states that say, no, look, we've got to do a better job of talking to blue-collar voters on the economy and on immigration and all of those things. Yeah. So the struggle is going to be really tough for the Democrats. What President Trump has been able to do is unite the Republicans behind him in a way that, 18 months ago you might not have foreseen.
That's thank you for saying that. I don't think anyone would have guessed that he would have made it his party as fast as he did.
Right. Well, there's something, the Democrats helped, right? Look at what they did to Brett Kavanaugh. That certainly was a unifying effect for Republicans across the board.
Yeah, by being unreasonable. Dana Perino of the Daily Briefing, The Five, and of course a key part of tomorrow night's election coverage. Probably.
Thank you. I'll see you then.
So we definitely will. Thank you, Dana.
Okay. Bye-bye.
We used to be a given that American leaders would put America first. Now even suggesting that they would do that is being denounced as evil. Why is that? Mark Stein joins us after the break. Every great president in American history was a staunch nationalist, probably the worst. Woodrow Wilson was an avid globalist, and it's not surprising that he got us into the single most pointless war in history. Over 100,000 Americans died in the First World War. Despite that, American elites tell us that nationalism is bad. Only globalism is morally acceptable. They say this because nationalism is racist, they claim. But in fact, nationalism has nothing at all to do with race. And if you want proof, look no further than the Democratic Party, which is completely obsessed with race. Literally, people are celebrated or attacked purely on the basis of their skin color. Democrats want jobs, college slots, opportunity itself divided, divvied up based on DNA. This is tribalism, and it's destroying the country. Nationalism doesn't cause tribalism. It is the antidote to tribalism. Rally around the nation and not your tribe. Author and columnist Mark Stein believes this is obvious, having spent his life traveling around the world and writing about it. But he joins us tonight to reiterate it. So this is so Orwellian because leaving Trump out of it Nationalism is the antidote to tribalism. We're all in different tribes. Ignore our tribes, come together, e pluribus unum, around the country, right?
Yeah, and that's actually how functioning states get by. Your principal identity is that you're an American in America, right, or you're a Swede in Sweden, or you're a Tuvaluan in Tuvalu. And if you weaken nationalism, people look for other identities, and it doesn't matter whether they're racial identities or their religious identities like Islam, or their sexual identities. You then, as you say, tribalize the population, and people's subnational identity becomes more important to them than the national identity, and that's actually that's an extremely dangerous experiment, because actually nationalism is the first duty of a government in self-governing societies.
Flesh that out a little bit. Nationalism is the first duty of a government. Why?
Yes, because without it, there's actually no point to being able to elect your leaders. They have a duty to take care of the people they represent. So when you have a situation, which is, you said putting Trump aside, but let's move him back just for a moment. A couple of years ago, people switched on the television and they found that the mainstream candidates of one party were talking about boots on the ground in Afghanistan or Libya or Yemen or wherever's next. And the other party's plan is it actually wants Afghanistan and Yemen and Libya and everyone in those countries to come and move to America to solve, as you were saying earlier, the problem of that they've caused of later family formation, because Americans can no longer afford to form families and have children as young as they used to. The Democrats and half the Republican Party want to bring in foreigners to be a kind of permanent peasant class, reproducing at the rates that they think are necessary for the economy. These are all insane. I mean, sometimes that's made absolutely explicit. Angela Merkel in Germany brought in 2 million young Muslim men to be the children that Germans didn't have for themselves. And this is an economically defective way to organize any kind of society.
Exactly. And it's also an abandonment of your core responsibility, which is to your own people, which is the core of nationalism. Mark Stein, I don't think anyone could have said it better than you just did. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Well, Democrats spent more than a month trying everything they could to destroy Brett Kavanaugh's life. It wasn't personal, though. They were just pushing obvious lies for political effect. And now we know that for sure. That's after the break. Well, last month, Democrats claimed they were absolutely certain that Brett Kavanaugh was a rapist, likely a gang rapist. But now that he's on the court, they have revealed what we knew all along, that they didn't know that. They didn't care if that was true or not. They only cared about saying anything they could to keep him off the court, no matter how libelous and absurd. Last week, one of the accusers of Brett Kavanaugh admitted to the Senate Judiciary Committee that she, in fact, made up the rape allegation against him. Senator Chuck Grassley has asked the Department of Justice to investigate that person. Tammy Bruce is a radio host and president of Independent Women's Voice, and she joins us tonight. Tammy, you'd think that there would be people who make a living protecting women who would say, wait a second, this is a big deal. You know, you should always admit when you're wrong. But I haven't heard anybody talk about this story, and certainly no one on the left. Why?
Yeah, look, it's not only are they not admitting that they were wrong, but the argument could be made that they knew from the start, right? So this was a political stunt. The problem is, though, is that they should also be angry. I mean, if they were serious,
right, that's
they would be angry that these certain people lied, that it reverses the impact of what we're trying to do for women for the last 20 years to get them to be taken seriously on the issue of sexual assault and domestic violence, etc. But you hear crickets. It's silence. And even the media. This was so important. Of course, it consumed media 24/7 for weeks, if not upwards of a month. And now you'd think, if this is still such a dynamic issue, I mean, my goodness, is it not a rapist that we've got on the Supreme Court? wouldn't that even require more outrage and more investigation? And yet, not only is there no more investigation into Kavanaugh, but there's no defense of the women. Right now, Julie Swetnick and Avenatti and others, but
Exactly.
Swetnick, they're going to need lawyers, right? They're going to need money moving to the future. They're going to need to be able to defend themselves at a federal level. And there's like silence for them, too. Everybody has run for the hills. And what this does confirm is that this was just simply a stunt, that they knew what they were doing. They didn't care about the impact on women overall, and they still don't. And that is the largest fraud facing the American people. The American left, not only not being champions for women and others on the fringe and for these issues, they've been enablers of having those issues get worse. And they are the enemy of women across this country. And I believe tomorrow we're going to see some of the results of that. We saw some change when it came to Democrats' enthusiasm and the gap between the enthusiasm after the Kavanaugh hearing, because I think that fraud finally was exposed, and now it has been confirmed with Senator Grassley's report.
It's remarkable, since you put it that way. That's right. They are not even trying to protect the women whose lives they said they so deeply cared about. What about all the candidates who said that last month, who are now running for office and have not said word one? It's very, and they're never asked about it.
Yeah, weirdly. And that's the strange thing, because I know the news moves quickly, but just everyone think about it. These women, they've thrown into the volcano, and they don't care. They don't care what's happened to them. No one's going to save those women. No one's going to save the people that have been referred. I mean, this is the DOJ. This isn't like, you know, your local prosecutor, and I love local prosecutors as well. But this is serious federal crime, and Grassley's not done yet. Grassley says, you know, they're looking at witness tampering on the Leland Kaiser case, and all of that.
It's amazing.
None of these women have support, and that's the Democratic Party that's looking to have more power starting tomorrow.
It's totally transactional. And no, we're not going to call you in the morning, apparently.
No, that's
Tammy,
right.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, if tomorrow night goes well, Republicans could pick up a Senate seat in New Jersey. Don't think that's happened, I think, since 1972. Certainly a long time. That'd be kind of amazing. We'll investigate that and other major competitive races after the break.